In these next few episodes, we'll be talking about some of the common criticisms of Maoism, starting with the criticism that Maoism is ultra-leftist and adventurist. Ultra-leftism is the tendency for a party to push too far ahead in the socialist project, or adopt policies which alienates the party from the masses. Ultra-left parties often adopt a commandist attitude towards the workers, meaning it forces the workers to do things against their will and with minimal democratic input. Many misuse the term ultra-left to simply mean radical, but this is not accurate. All revolutionary parties are radical when compared to the liberal status quo. Following this logic, even bourgeois ideologies such as social democracy can be seen as ultra-left in terms of its perceived radicalism, especially within the American context. But to be considered ultra-left is to imply an abandonment of the mass line. In order to differentiate illegitimate accusations of ultra-leftism from actual ultra-leftism, we must have an understanding of the mass line. So when Maoists speak of a mass line, we do so with the understanding that the masses of the working class will be at different stages of acceptance and understanding. There will be those who suffer more under the current system, and some who suffer less. There will be those who embrace reactionary views and advocate for the bourgeois state, and there will be those who embrace proletarian views and advocate for socialism. The goal of the mass line is to entrench the party within the masses, to empower and recruit from the revolutionary and advanced sectors of the working class, to strengthen and embolden the intermediate sectors, and to educate the backward sectors into socialism. A revolutionary mass line may not have the initial support of the backwards working class, but every effort must be taken to attempt to educate them into socialism, not from a chauvinistic or patronizing viewpoint, but upon examining the contradictions within those backward sectors while teasing out a revolutionary nucleus from the reactionary muck. Obviously, Maoist parties are capable of becoming ultra-left if the mass line is not maintained, but a party which properly adheres to the mass line cannot be ultra-left by definition. Often, a party which insists on line struggle against revisionism is called ultra-left by the revisionist merely for supporting revolution. As previously stated, there's also a tendency to misapply the mass line by supporting the backwards and reactionary elements of the working class over the advanced and revolutionary elements. Revisionists will gladly support the reactionary elements of the working class and call any who dare combat the forces of reaction ultra-left. They will also disguise the capitalist road as pragmatic while denouncing the socialist road as ultra-left. In this manner, the term ultra-left is weaponized by the revisionists and used as a bludgeon to suppress genuine line struggles and to slander revolutionaries as fringe, violent, or idealist radicals. Care must be taken to properly differentiate these unsubstantiated accusations of ultra-leftism from actual ultra-leftism. Actual ultra-leftism is a threat to the revolution. It risks alienating the party from the masses and, in its most extreme manifestations, actively turns the masses against the party and into the hands of counter-revolutionaries. Maoist formations have committed the error of ultra-leftism in the past and have suffered setbacks and defeat as a partial consequence. However, all left tendencies are capable of committing the error of ultra-leftism, and so to universally classify the entire Maoist tendency as ultra-leftist is a fundamental mistake committed by those who critique Maoism without the understanding that Maoists also critique this error as well, and often do so with much greater clarity. To call each and every attempt to apply Maoism ultra-leftist is to create a boy cried wolf scenario, where the true meaning of ultra-leftism becomes lost, and when actual ultra-leftism manifests itself, the error goes unrecognized amid the mountains of mischaracterizations and accusations. Adventurism is an attempt to advance the revolution without a sufficient support base from the working masses. Adventurists are those who aspire to commit revolutionary action, not out of a sense of necessity or with sufficient support and preparation, but merely for the sake of violence and adventure. They're often of a petty bourgeoisie consciousness and wish to join the party not out of a sense of obligation or conviction, but a desire to be heroes and earn fame. They often engage in reckless behavior, with little discipline. This places the entire movement in danger and encourages the retaliation of the bourgeois state during a premature phase in the revolution, where the party is at its weakest and the masses are not yet awakened. A Maoist cadre joins the party and engages in revolutionary action out of necessity and with discipline. Adventurism is often an issue, particularly within anarchist tendencies, but this, like ultra-leftism, may apply to many tendencies. Also, like ultra-leftism, accusations of adventurism are often used by revisionists as a shield to justify inaction or capitulation to liberalism. Conscious of how accusations of adventurism are used to universally denounce Maoism, we must still be aware as to the dangers of true adventurism and how this can lead to ruin. All action undertaken by the party must be planned in advance and must have sufficient support from within the masses of the working class. To act in a way that is detached from mass support would alienate the party from the masses and become ultra-leftist. At its worst, adventurism may turn the masses against the party and into the hands of counter-revolutionaries and the bourgeois state. Adventurism prevents the establishment and maintenance of the mass line and is therefore opposed to Maoism, which demands for all revolutionary action to be undertaken while maintaining the mass line. Because of this, it's simply inaccurate to assert that all Maoist movements are adventuristic by default. Certainly, adventurism has been a problem in Maoist movements, but, like the rest of these criticisms, they are not solely limited to Maoism, but can also apply to Marxism-Leninism and numerous other tendencies. Now that we've reviewed what ultra-leftism is and what adventurism is and what it is not, with an understanding of how these concepts become weaponized by revisionists, what can Maoists actually do to tackle the problems of these errors when they do manifest? As we discussed, the main way to tackle these obstacles is to maintain the mass line. However, what if we are in a country with a majority of the working class which is highly reactionary? In this case, the party must unite and empower the advanced sectors, those sectors most likely to oppose the bourgeois state and support the revolution in the first place. This is done through a careful examination of their particular conditions. What are their living standards? What sort of economic tools of oppression do they face? What sort of cultural oppressions do they face? What can we, as Maoists, learn from these conditions, and how can we adapt to these conditions in a way that unites this advanced sector with our movement? These are the questions we must ask ourselves from the start. From there, we begin to gain a support base amongst the masses and use this support base to strengthen and embolden the intermediate sectors of the working class, whose revolutionary consciousness may be latent and undeveloped. This is the case with many so-called progressives who are semi-conscious and may feel as if the system is flawed and dysfunctional but lack the theoretical lens to view the magnitude of this dysfunction to its fullest extent. It is our job to provide clarity and direction in this regard, awakening this latent proletarian consciousness into full awareness, and direct this newfound clarity towards the goal of revolution. As for the backward elements, we must try to educate them into socialism, into a proletarian consciousness. This is a tremendous uphill battle because many of them are imbued with anti-communist rhetoric and mindlessly recite all of the propaganda against communism they've heard throughout their lives. We must try to be patient with them and find a way to tease out some semblance of proletarian consciousness out of the revolutionary muck. Most often, we have to start with the very basics, pointing out concepts which seem obvious to those who aren't reactionary. That racism is bad, religious discrimination and dogmatic bigotry are bad, fascism is bad, etc. These individuals have to be deprogrammed and re-educated. This is not to say that Maoists should talk down to them or treat them like children, but we must understand that they have a child's understanding of the world, of politics, of economics, and of society. And like a temperamental and disruptive child, Maoists must be patient but firm and not compromise the integrity of our message with dishonesty. As we stated in the previous episode, communism is anti-white supremacy, anti-imperialist, anti-conservative, anti-bigotry, and anti-religious. We can't beat around the bush and pretend like communism is compatible with any of these aspects. Most often, it is the religious aspect which is the most troubling, particularly from reactionary sectors. There will be a future video detailing how Maoists should deal with the topic of religion, but the important lesson here is that Maoism rejects metaphysics, and by extension, rejects a religious interpretation of reality. Religion can be a tool for revolution, as is the case with liberation theology, but it's a double-edged sword if metaphysics is allowed to supplant dialectical materialism, and Maoists would be remiss to rely too heavily on metaphysical arguments to prop up our theory in order to reach the masses, sacrificing our theoretical integrity in the name of convenience. What about Adventurism? This is simply a matter of awareness. The party must be aware of what stage they're in. If a sufficient support base is not yet established among the masses, any action undertaken to jumpstart the revolution would be premature and would most likely result in the destruction of the party, severe setbacks, alienation from the masses, and counter-revolution from the bourgeois state and their supporters. Adventurism results from impatience and immaturity, from a desire to be a hero and to make a name for oneself. This was the strategy of the Narodnik movement in Russia prior to the Soviet Union, and is frequently seen among anarchists as well. In the beginning stages of forming a revolutionary movement, adventurism is suicide. Contrary to the assumption that heroic displays of adventurism will inspire the masses to rise up, it will actually drive the masses deeper into the hands of the bourgeois state. Within adventurism, there is a rampant individualism, and Maoism, as a movement of the working class, must reject this individualism. So that about does it for this episode. Just to review, we talked about the concepts of ultra-leftism and how Maoists must be cognizant of the error of ultra-leftism while also being cognizant of weaponization of the term ultra-leftism as a tool used by revisionists to suppress revolutionary lines. We must also be cognizant of the error of adventurism, while also taking into account how revisionists will weaponize accusations of adventurism in order to suppress revolutionary struggle. We concluded with how Maoists can actually counter ultra-leftism and adventurism. Be sure to join us next time where we discuss how Maoism counters sectarianism, dogmatism, and cults of personality. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Danky Kang, out.